Okay, let's go over some of these features for editing digital images. And there are some really nice ones in here, especially when you're working with cameras that use the RAW file format. Do any of you have cameras that use RAW files? Yeah. Well, in CS4 there's even some better features for that, but this does a pretty nice job. So these are the files. This should be lesson 6, 7, 1 or 2. I'm going to go ahead and open these, I hope. There we go. It's lesson 7 here. There we go. Now I think it doubled what I needed. Okay, so let's start with the mission part of it. And when you open digital files, especially ones that are saved in RAW file format, you get Camera Raw, which is an application with an application within an application. As you're no longer in Photoshop, you're no longer in Bridge, it's its own application. And you'll notice here that when we look at this picture of the mission, and then to the right, there's lots of ways that we can tweak this image. This is all based on metadata that's found inside these digital images. For example, you may have taken the image, this one in particular, at an exposure that made it a little bit too dark, so maybe it's underexposed. But there's all the data in there that we can say, okay, do we want to leave it as shot, or we want to say this is shot on a cloudy day? And notice how the color changes when you do that. You can also come down here, and if you still feel it's a little too dark, we can lighten it up. You can really go crazy with it and overexpose it or underexpose it. You can change all sorts of attributes in these images. Save it as a separate RAW file format, not the one that was created by Canon, but in Photoshop's RAW file format, and it's still, none of this is, all of this is non-destructive. You can go back and continue to edit this as much as you want. Very, very nice. Now, the one part of this exercise that they want us to work on is, if I were to go back, and I'll show you, I'm going to go ahead and open, let me see if I have extra files open first. And no, these are corrected. So I can put this away for the time being. I'll put this away for the time being. We can correct perspective in here. And they've got some new perspective features. This one, I don't really much like what they've done with the image, but we will do that anyway to show you what you can do. This is the original file. But what we're going to do is I want to open the mission folder in here. And you'll see that we have 3 images that were taken on the same day, but they were taken with different exposures. They look slightly different. So what we can do is we can open all 3 of these, and it opens it in Camera Raw first, and you'll notice that we can toggle between each of these and make changes. We can treat them separately, or more importantly, oftentimes what you're going to do, especially Nicholas isn't here today, but he's an advanced student of mine who has worked on books in the past. And one of the things that you'll want oftentimes is that if you have a lot of people in your skin tones in ads, in books, and whatever, magazines, you want the skin tones to be pretty consistent from page to page. That would be one example. The other is let's say you have the same photograph of the mission, but it was shot on different days, shot with different exposures, shot in different lighting conditions, whatever, but you want them all to look uniform. You want them all have the same, basically the same color settings. So how do you do that? And that's what this part of the exercise focuses on. What we can do with all of these open is I can shift click to make sure that I have all 3 of them selected to the left. I can pick the image that I want to use as the principal image in which to determine how the others are going to look. So notice that I have white balance set to cloudy. We could go back to look at it as shot, see how that looks. It is a slightly cloudy day. We can look at it at daylight, see how we want it. The book will give you the specific numbers to put in here. That's neither here nor there. But what I want to show you, I'll make this cloudy. We'll change the exposure a little bit. If we want, we can change. If you want it to pump it up and add a little bit more black, a little bit less black, we can do that. Change any number of features. Now, once I'm done with these settings, if I want to shift this more towards the yellows, more towards the blues, however, whatever I want to do with the tints, with the temperature settings, I can do so. Let me go back to cloudy settings, and I have this default exposure. What I can do now is that I can open the images, and by opening the images, what I will do is that all three of these now have the same settings, the same color settings that were used over here. So they all look consistent with one another. Does everybody understand that? That is really very cool. So what if you had a dozen, 100 images, and you wanted to make sure that they all had fundamentally the same settings? Select them all over here, double click on all of them, especially if they're raw file formats. Select them all here. Make sure that they have, that you use one dominant image to adjust your settings. They will all have the same settings. You can toggle back and forth to see, which ones work, which ones don't work, make some minor adjustments. And then you can either save those images and save them as a different raw file format. Right now, these are CRW files, which stands for Canon RAW. It knows what kind of camera, not only Canon, but this was taken with an EOS Digital Rebel camera. So much metadata in here, it'll make your head spin, know exactly what's available in here. And we can go ahead and open all three of these or save all three of these any way you want. And we have consistency between all three of them. Even though they had different exposures, even though that they looked initially different from the beginning, they look pretty consistently the same now. Okay, notice the church in the back, the same one. Look at how the pink is the same in all three. Pretty nice. So that's one of many things that you can do with Camera Raw. Very, very nice. I'll go ahead and close these now. Let's move on to the next part of this. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And let's bring Photoshop back up. This one is as good as any. They have really lightened the background up, and I think way, way too much. I kind of like it with a dark background myself, but they feel that they've improved it. They want it because oftentimes, especially when you're using a flash, what will happen is that it focuses on the person and it leaves everything else dark. Well, there's still data in there that can be pulled out. So what we can do, and I will sort of do what they have in here, we'll take some of the red eye out of him. We'll also go ahead and lighten up the background a little bit, but I want to show you some of the problems of what occurs when you do that. Is that we'll take the image, and then we can go to Edit, and we can select, I'm sorry, wait a minute. File, Automate, no. It's the wrong one. Third time's the charm. Image Adjustments, and what I want to do is I want Shadow Highlight. And now what we'll do is you'll see that it takes the background and that was underexposed, and now we can control that. By default, it's set to 50%. We can lighten it way up. I kind of like the default setting myself, that it adds a little bit of detail, but it doesn't detract from the image, that you really want it left alone. And again, they're going to go ahead and highlights and whatever, we can make appropriate adjustments in here. The book will tell you there's a few more adjustments that we have in here that we can tweak. But again, it goes to show you that when you're working with digital images, even though some of your initial camera settings may not be what you had hoped, and the image doesn't come out quite like you had thought it should be, there's a lot that you can do in here to improve it, to make changes. So I'm going to leave that alone. So it looks a little bit different than theirs. I think this looks a little bit nicer. The downside to this is that when you use shadow highlight, and you especially see it in here, is that you can see how grainy the background becomes. And there are some things that you have to do, like blur, among other things, to tweak it, to fix it. It's just the nature of the beast when you do that. So that would be another reason I would caution you against doing that too much, because it really won't look that good. Yes?
Can you use any other tool to like bring out the, can you use any other tool without showing the grainy stuff?
You could probably use levels. You could make a selection of the image. Here, watch. Let's undo this. Another way that you might do this is go ahead, and I'm going to do a really rough selection of her, like so, and him. Let's go ahead and add this one. We could use levels. We could use a couple of other things that we have at our disposal. So I want to protect them, and I want to affect the background. So let's go to image or select inverse. So now I have the background selected instead. You can tell we have the background selected because now the borders have the marching ants for the around the edge as well. We can go ahead and either in layers, that would probably be the best thing to do. Let's bring up layers and let's use an adjustment layer. Let's select levels. Now you can go ahead and you can tweak that. So that would be another way to do it. That does it automatically. And actually this looks best yet, I think. So it's lightening it up. But you know, there's usually at least two, minimum two, usually three different ways of doing the same thing. Okay. So you can make adjustments, but that's an automatic feature. That isn't half bad, but one of the other features that you may have noticed, there's the Redeye tool that all sorts of programs have now. So what we're going to do is we're going to first make a selection. We'll go ahead and make a little selection around the kid's eyes. Zoom in first, I suppose. I'm going to go ahead and select a little area around here. And let's select the Redeye tool. And then what we can do is we can darken amount 50% and pupil size 50%. You can adjust those features. I'm just going to go ahead and click in here and see what we get. Doesn't look half bad. That's all there is to it, removing Redeye, or whatever it's called. We'll go ahead and we'll move the selection over. So now we select this one. We have the settings look pretty good. We'll go ahead and do the same thing. Select the Redeye tool. Go ahead and click in the red area and notice how it fixes it. Deselect, zoom back out. Whoops. Hey, come on. Why is it doing that? Okay. Something was wonky with this. Okay, so those are the two principal parts of this piece. There's some other settings that we can change to make sure that the highlights aren't so extreme from the flash on her face and that sort of thing. But by and large, this exercise focuses more on anything and lightening up the background and taking out the red eye from the camera. So again, lots of information that's in there, even though that your digital image looks like it's gone crazy, it can still be fixed. Again, the only thing you really can't fix is that if your image is severely out of focus. Can't do anything about that. Next one, we'll go ahead and we'll open the side of this. Looks sort of like a school. You'll notice in here, in the original, that it has 3 windows and it has a little wreath along the side. Well, what if we want to remove the wreath and we want to go ahead and add another window? How do you do that? And make sure, because notice all of the clapboards are in perspective. Because if I just copy one of these, if I go ahead and I select this, use the selection tool, let's use the rectangular selection tool, whoops, to show you what would happen. If I select the rectangular selection tool and I select this, which is what I could do, hold down the Option Command key and make a copy of it, I can do that, but notice that the clapboards are still the same size. They haven't reduced in size. I'd have to reduce the image, and they wouldn't necessarily be in perspective. So that's what this new tool does, is it allows us to take areas, make copies of them, and then move them in another region that we've defined using 1-point perspective, and then it will allow us to make really pretty accurate copies. I'm going to do a so-so version because it takes time to really zoom in and to finesse it, but the tool overall is pretty good. So what I'm going to do first is make a selection in here, try to get over as far as I can, like so. And then I'm going to go to Filter, and I'm going to select Vanishing Point. And I goofed, I didn't want to do that. I'm going to cancel this. Let's do this again. Select the image, go to Filter, and I want to select Vanishing Point. Where is it? Vanishing Point, right here. It brings up an ancillary application. And now what we can do is we can click, whoops, oh come on, let me try to reset. And cancel once again. Oh, Kirk, please don't make it too difficult on me. Okay. So I click, move the mouse, and I click, and I move the mouse, and I'm just following the perspective of the side of the building. And then I click one last time. And notice that what happens, it defines that is in one dimension or 1-point perspective now. Now what I can do is I can take the selection tool. Notice that this turns to a blue. And I can come back in here and click like so to highlight that area, because what I want to do now is I want to remove the wreath. That'll be the first thing that I do. Just as we had done before, Option Command, and I click, and notice that as I move it down the plane, see how it gets smaller and the perspective follows the rest? So we can, you still have to match it up, so it's not perfect. And then once again, Option click, and it still might have to fix this a little bit, but you get the idea. The color is off just a tad, and that will be a problem. But notice how the thickness matches pretty well, and that it is in perspective. Similarly, we can go ahead and take, for example, the window, and Option Command to reduce it in size, and notice how it reduces in size really nicely. Fits the perspective. Put it in here and deselect, and I've copied a window. In perspective, looks perfect. Now there is another exercise later on, and they've expanded this perspective feature, and it will follow, if you wish, it will wrap an image on a 3-dimensional box. It's really useful for taking a 2-dimensional image and wrapping it around and making it look like it's actually on a 3-dimensional surface. It has limited applications, but what it does do, it does pretty well. So there we go. Okay, we've made that revision, we've made that change. So that's the next thing that they want us to do. The next one, and the last one, is that one of the things that all cameras will do is that they will distort. And you'll notice that this is a close-up view. It was probably taken, my guess, with a wide angle lens, and it looks like the columns are bowed. So what we can do is we can go ahead and correct for this, and I got to so that it's not completely, the distortion isn't completely removed, but a good part of it. Okay. So we'll go ahead and we'll select this, and I want to go to, I got to remember where the heck it is. Filter, distort. Where is distort? Distort. And what I want is glass lens correction right here. You notice that there's a lot of other features that we have in here that we'll cover later on, from wave effects and zigzag, where you can make it look your image all ripply and stuff. But what we want now is we're going to take and we're going to correct the lens. So you start with a basic grid, and what we're going to do is remove the distortion. Now I can exaggerate the distortion, make it look like it was taken with a fisheye lens, or I can come back like so. And again, the book wants us to do, I don't remember, what percentage. But we can go ahead and fix that. And now what we have to do, because notice how it bows in our edges, is that what we need to do is we need to change the edge, and we're going to go ahead and change the scale a little bit to correct for that so that it fits the complete size. So we do lose some of our image. It doesn't completely fix the distortion, but it does a pretty good job. And there you go. That's all there is to it, just some nice effects for correcting digital images. There is one other from lynda.com that I would like to show you, that for those of you who have digital cameras but you do not have raw file format. Most digital cameras now will have raw file format, which is the way to go. You can't take as many images because there tend to be larger files. But, for quality stuff, it's really worthwhile. To be able to open your image in the digital RAW, or camera RAW, or whatever it's called, you can also open TIFF and JPEGs. And there's a tutorial on this from lynda.com I'd like to show you, but I'm going to turn off the video recorder so we don't have to deal with any of their copyright laws. But that is that in a nutshell. Now, if you have the CS4 book and it wants you to work with the blurred, you have two images and parts of each one are blurred, you have to do that in CS4. So if whoever has a computer with CS4 on it, you'll be able to do that part of the image, that part of the exercise. In any of the other computers with CS3, that feature does not exist. Okay? So let me turn off the video recorder and we'll go to lynda.com and I'll show you that aspect of working with camera raw. And